So this isn't a fresh from the game review of Condemned. Chiefly because I didn't want my, let's be honest here, frustration to get in the way of being objective, because in all honesty, yeah, Condemned is one of the better survival horror titles to have dropped in the 2000s, alongside Fear, which also happened to be developed by Monolith, in what I can only describe as Warner Brothers actually making Monolith produce some consistently good games. Okay, apart from all the weird licensed titles, but Warner's got a Warner. Dropping in 2005, conspicuously within shouting distance of another atmospheric first-person horror game where the protagonist discovers hitherto unknown abilities and wills them against an unfathomable horror, Condemned openly went for a much more dark, intimate and seedy use of horror, putting our hobo-slaughtering and quite nominal protagonist, Ethan Thomas, on the constant defensive against an unknowable plague of sheer hatred which drives large swaths of the population to indiscriminate violence. Although, conspicuously, it's mostly the homeless and the poor who bear the brunt of this, which is a shame, as I think we'd all feel a lot more comfortable belting an investment banker around the head with a crowbar over pummeling some poor bastard with undiagnosed bipolar disorder, but again, I'm getting off topic. The game fuses short, intense bursts of melee combat with an elusive, meandering plot, with some light exploration and basic investigation features in a bid to produce a gritty, unknowable sense of dread. You're always 2 steps behind the man you're chasing, Serial Killer X, and for every answer you get, more questions spring up to take their place. In a way, it's attempting to channel some of that sense of cosmic horror that you'd honestly feel more at home in like a Lovecraft adaptation, but it doesn't quite get there. To explain why I have this, arguably entirely incorrect opinion, let's have a quick look at one of the films that Condemned openly cited as an inspiration, the movie Seven. If you've seen David Fincher's Seven, and honestly at this point, please do, it's a very, very good film, you might be familiar with this particular scene, which I found to be very evocative of the tone of the whole movie, which serves, in the context of the film, to point out just how done Morgan Freeman's character is with this endemic violence in this nameless city.
I don't think you're leaving. Hell, you can't leave all this.
Guy's out walking his dog. Gets attacked. His watch is taken, his wallet. While he's lying there on the sidewalk, helpless, his attacker stabs him in both eyes. Now, this happened just last night, about 4 blocks from here.
Yeah, I read about it.
I don't understand this place any longer.
It's the way it's always been.
Now, in the film, if this had been intercut with, say, gory footage of the stabbing taking place, the knife going in and out of the eyeball in excruciating detail, all that Eli Roth bullshit, I don't think it would have been quite so meaningful. It would have been nauseating and disturbing, yes, but not as effective as leaving all of our emotional input from this information to come through Freeman's almost resigned delivery, as if he was explaining how to use the photocopier for the 50th time. This is where Condemned, as a horror game, stumbles. It's dark, and it's creepy, and it's very efficient at ratcheting up the tension as you pick your way through claustrophobic environments, but the combat, and particularly the frequency and explicit nature of it, is almost a release. It's almost catharsis. The fear isn't lingering just out of sight. It's not some unknowable truth that you cannot comprehend. It's lying in a pool of blood at your feet. By having the player brawl with dozens of influenced, the effect lessens. The trauma of beating some poor fuck to death with a shovel to save your own life is diluted through repetition. As they become more contorted and monstrous, especially as we enter the later levels where the enemies devolve into S&M troglodytes, feasting on anonymous heaps of gore, the conflict of taking the first swing against people who can't control their own actions is resolved as easily as if there were a zombie from Resident Evil. To that end, the gameplay of Condemned is solid. Swinging weapons feels pleasantly meaty. The back and forth of attack and parry serves as a nice reward for skillful players. Even when guns enter the equation, which do frequently eke out much of the tension in combat, they're seen as more of a reward for exploration than directly foisted upon you. At least until the farm section, but we're going to get to that, believe me. There are some issues. Ethan does move with the speed of a glacier, with a sprinting time that's uncomfortably close to my own ability, reducing a lot of the exploration to more of a dismal trudge, and making combat against multiple opponents a tactical nightmare. Being overwhelmed by enemies is fine, but actively making you slower than everyone else, ensuring you have to fight your way through each encounter, just makes for an annoying slog. Oh, and the doors. These fucking doors. If you want a better example of naked padding of a game's runtime, I don't know a better place to look. Never mind that you're probably just as capable of bashing down a door with a hammer or an axe or any of the other implements you've got to hand throughout the game, you know, like the fucking crowbar, but the fact remains that running into a door like this usually means you're about to take a trip round the houses to find the one implement you need, usually by braining the previous owner with a brick. Beyond the combat, the investigation parts of the game are a bit shit, really. Reduced to the kind of pixel hunting logic I'd be expecting of a point-and-click adventure game, these segments where Ethan pores over crime scenes are really just poorly camouflaged exposition with a 30-second delay while you find the trigger. It's only near the end of the game, where you're tracing lines of mad scribbling throughout an abandoned farmhouse with a UV light, that this sense of investigation really comes to fruition at all. You're exposed, focused on the details while unseen assailants lurk in the darkness outside. It's actually unnerving, so points for that, but otherwise it's pretty much pointless. There are some rewards for exploring the environments, collecting bits of satanic license plates and dead birds for Ethan to presumably snack on, but they're all for concept art, which is nice, I guess, but doesn't so much feel like a reward like, say, hunting down a hidden shotgun or a revolver does. Condemned 2 did this a lot better, in my opinion, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's finish this review before I even start the other fucking game. So the gameplay itself isn't really all that conducive to the whole horror thing. Not the end of the world. Monolith proved you could have your murder cake and eat it a month early with Fear, a game lauded for its ability to have you feeling like a badass one moment and then bullying you into pissing your pants the next. Much of that success came from the game's ability to set the tone and to manage the player's anxiety levels. From a visual and directorial level, it was superb. How does Condemned measure up to that then? Well, honestly, pretty damn well. Where Fear brought nightmarish gore to sterile office environments, Condemned absolutely revels in the filth, drawing a lot of its scares from cramped layouts, flickering lights, and all too real urban breakdown and decay. It's cheap, without a doubt, with a good few jump scares in certain places to keep your arsehole suitably puckered, but it's served up in such an unapologetic way it's hard not to take a shine to it. It may be a haunted house at the carnival, but it's a very well made one. Admittedly, time hasn't been kind to this game. Even on the PC, this really feels like a console release first and foremost, with low-resolution textures and some legendarily chunky character models. Ethan, in particular, looks like someone stuffed an NCU uniform with half a ton of ham and then nailed it with a spray tan, which might explain his movement, come to think of it. And for some, that's going to be off-putting. The enemies, as far as I can tell, manage to get a bit more attention, with a lot of variation and detail to their designs, but that often leads to some pretty jarring shifts in quality as cutscenes remind us of just how much of a Duplo-looking motherfucker Ethan actually is. Mention should also be made for Rosa, Ethan's partner in crime fighting, who serves as our font of exposition for much of the game. Now, as a character, she's absolutely fine. Does the job, delivers a nice bit of snark here and there, but otherwise doesn't do a lot. I just wanted to comment on the fact that her model here is chunky. And that's good. That's honestly really fucking good, intentional or not, because holy shit, I'm struggling to think of the last time I played a game where a female character of any race was portrayed as plus-sized and it wasn't for laughs. So, credit where it's due. At least until the sequel.
I received the call 10:36 this morning.
So the gameplay itself ain't all that conducive to the old spoops, but the presentation definitely gets the point across. Not bad so far. All that's left is the plot. So you might have watched or read something that outstayed its welcome. It skipped a good moment to end, and then just kept going. Or it ended, but then ended some more, and then ended again and again, and if you've watched the last Lord of the Rings movie, you've already experienced this. It's not that anything leading up to this point was bad, but once it misses its chance to wrap things up, it's either going to trail off into nothingness or awkwardly come crashing to a halt. This is where Condemned, in my opinion, fucks up. Up until the final act, everything has been excellent. The city is crumbling under the inexplicable onslaught of random violence. Ethan fights to clear his name while succumbing to strange visions, discovering that his past and even his body have secrets that they aren't going to give up willingly. There's a vast sense of dread pervading every interaction, with nobody but Rosa really being capable of giving Ethan a straight answer to any of his questions. At every step, we're chasing down leads, hoping that the next answer might shed some light onto what's been going on. But they never do. It's a spiral into darkness. To bring this back around to 7 again, and spoilers if you haven't seen it, but the ending makes a point about closure. The killer, John Doe, turns himself in, completely robbing the main characters of making the arrest or of saving any more lives. John has already won. There's no climactic shootout or struggle with a knife at the edge of a precipice. Even his final piece, Wrath, is only made complete because the cop he wants to be killed by looks inside the box that his partner has just warned him not to look in. He does. He kills John. He becomes Wrath. It's gut-wrenching, and it's not at all a happy ending, but it's a complete ending. It's satisfying in a bitter kind of way. If there had been a race against the clock to save John's final victim, or some kind of grand battle, it would have detracted from the tone the film had spent so much time setting up. This is where Condemned doesn't quite so much fail to stick the landing as it just avoids the crash mat altogether and walks off. In the penultimate chapter, Ethan tracks down serial killer X's final target, the torturer, to an orchard outside of town. Through following the aforementioned scrawlings, we piece together SKX's message and... anyway. We eventually find the torturer dead by his own hand, just as his victims have been left to take their own lives. Knowing that serial killer X probably doesn't know this yet, Ethan takes the torturer's clothes and adopts the same pose to lure him in. There's a struggle, and there's a chase throughout the house. Then Ethan brings him down, only to get taken out by Malcolm Van Horn, the uncle of serial killer X, aka Leland Van Horn. Leland chokes Malcolm out, escapes, we fade to black. If that had ended any differently, if Ethan had just taken Leland down and arrested him, you could have ended the game right there. Or even had him escape but leave it on a cliffhanger. Just roll the credits, just cut it. That's enough. Instead, we wake up in a barn, which rapidly catches fire, and proceed to slaughter our way through the orchard past an unreasonable amount of deformed and burned influenced, who I can only assume are either day labourers or a really fucking unlucky tour group. There's lots of shooting, lots of fighting, we go through a gauntlet of mooks without any fucking checkpointing. Then we go mano-e-motherfucker with The Hate, the big bad who's been sporadically lobbing his underlings at you throughout the game and now comes out to sort you out with a big stick? We slap the shit out of him several times, rip and tear, huge guts, you know the drill. At this point, we have stopped being a horror story. There are still weird, gory, creepy aspects to the game, but we are explicitly going from A to B and leaving no arse unfucked in our quest to end this shit. This would be like putting Cthulhu in an armbar at the end of Dark Corners of the Earth. It would be hilarious, but it wouldn't be horror. This whole final section feels, to me at least, tacked on. It's like someone went, well, we need to have a showdown with the bad guy, right? And nobody pointed out that as far as Ethan was concerned, catching serial killer X was the showdown. He could clear his name, resolve these cases, and get back to his old life. Yes, there would still be a lot of questions remaining about what's going on with the people going crazy and why there's so much about Ethan we don't know about, but up until now, none of that has really intersected with Ethan's motivations. It's caused conflict, it's set him back, but it's not been directly tied into it beyond some weird symbology and the occasional appearance of the Hate's S&M posse. It's not the end of the world. It's not enough to make me write off the game whatsoever. It just strikes me as a wasted opportunity to leave some threads hanging for a sequel, given that one was made, clearly, and that Warner Brothers hadn't just been exploring the ideas for a film adaptation, but a universe with connected storylines and different games and films sharing in the same world. Now, excuse me, but hell fucking yes, I am down to clown with that. Alas, for some reason or another, this didn't end up happening. The game apparently needed more closure, and the ending we got is the one we got. Maybe an earlier draft didn't have this, or maybe it was the intended ending all along. I just find it funny that for a game that cites Seven and Silence of the Lambs as two major influences, nobody addressed the fact that in both films the heroes achieve a hollow victory, if at all. Sure, the bad guy dies, but only after they've already done with their work, or in doing so, an even more dangerous killer is now on the loose. Anyway, I think I've rambled on long enough. Condemned is a good game. It's taut, it's vicious, it's gritty, and it's unrelenting. It suffers from a few questionable or ill-thought-out gameplay decisions, and the plot doesn't stick the landing, but otherwise it's still a game very much worth playing. Okay, this is 6 pages. This is long enough. Anyway, it's good. It's grab it on Steam. There is an issue with the audio, so you will need to grab a hotfix if you do want to play it on Steam. But on consoles, obviously, it's going to be absolutely fine. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to this review. I have taken far too long to get this fucking done. Jesus fucking Christ, I'm going to go now. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye!